Hey, this is Brighter Rays. We're looking at a study called The House of God, and we're in Genesis chapter 28. Today we're looking at verses 13 through 15. This is the story of Jacob's ladder, and we've already talked about the vision that he had. He saw the ladder, he saw the angels going up and down, and we saw the connection of that Christ made back to that. He says, guess what? You're going to see the Son of Man as that ladder, and angels ascending and descending on him. And then we see the message here in Jacob's vision that he has. It's not just the ladder, but he sees God and God speaks. And so that's the amazing part too. So let's look at verses 13 through 15 here. The first thing we want to see is that the message is unsought. Jacob, having beheld the vision, sees God and hears him speak. Remember that Jacob is not seeking after God at all. He has not come to the place to inquire of God. Not like his mother inquired of God. He has not asked God to confirm the blessing that Isaac spoke over him. He has not asked for a divine confirmation that he is the chosen son. But this is what God does here. God speaks and confirms his promise to Rebekah. He establishes the stolen blessing of Isaac. Remember, we talked about how Isaac confirmed that blessing. Well, it's just Isaac, but now God is stepping in and says, hey, I know you stole the blessing. I knew that Isaac was going to confirm the blessing, and now God comes and says, hey, I'm conferring these promises upon you. I'm conferring the covenant of Abraham upon you. So let's take a look at the promise. First, God says, I am the Lord. This is the covenant name of God, Yahweh. So he shows up to Jacob and says, there's no doubt of what God you're entering in here. This is who you're entering into in the presence of Jacob. You have come into the presence of Yahweh God. Then he says, I am the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. So that's another thing. He says, I am Yahweh. I am the divine one, the nameless one. The one you can't really approach. And then he says, but I'm the God of your father Abraham. I'm the God of your father Isaac. So yet he is a transcendent God. He is the divine God. And yet, he is the one who's immanent. He's the one who's near. I'm the God of your fathers. So I'm close. I'm far off, but I'm close at the same time. So, though he is alone, Jacob is, he's not alone. He's never alone. Then Jacob is told that the land on which he is sleeping will be given to him and his descendants. This was the promise that was given to Abraham. And now Jacob hears the same promise directly from God. The dirt he is sleeping on is really his dirt. He's not sleeping on someone else's dirt. That's his dirt. That's the rock that he's using. The pillow rock that he's using, that's his rock. It belongs to him. In verse 14, God speaks the other two parts of the covenant, the multitudes of descendants, and then the blessing of the nations. Just like the dust he's sleeping in, Jacob's descendants will spread across the world and will bless all the families of the earth. The last thing that God says to Jacob is, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. What a great encouragement to this liar and cheat, right? Jacob has made a mess of everything. And yet God has promised to be with him wherever he goes. This would become a familiar encouragement to God's people. The children of our church that I pastor at has learned Joshua 1:9 this past year. That says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So you see, this promise keeps coming back over and over again. The promise that God is with you. I'm going with you. Here's the promise. This is the promise that Abraham was given. This is the same promise that I transferred over to Isaac. And this is the same promise I'm giving over to you, Jacob. I'm with you, Jacob. Whether you're with me or not, I'm with you. And so we see God's providence here. We see God's sovereignty. He's in control of the situation, even though Jacob has been sinning and has done some stuff, and he's really not seeking after God, but God is seeking after him. God's going after him. God's chasing him down. Jacob cannot resist. He's resisting, and ultimately he will fail. He will fail. If God wants Jacob, he will have Jacob. Nothing can stop God, correct? And so we got to see here irresistible grace. God is firing this grace at him. Grace after grace after grace, especially the whole family, but especially Jacob here. And God is just dumping this grace on him. And Jacob is not seeking it. He's not seeking God himself. He's not looking for this grace. So this is definitely a picture of grace that, in one sense he is resisting it, but yet he's still receiving it, right? He's not able to refund that or rebuke it or to stop it. He's receiving grace whether he likes it or not. Which is really the point of grace, isn't it? I mean, grace is unearned. So if you can't earn it, then can you unearn it? Is that a word? Unearn? I guess so. Can you, we often use merit and demerit, but can you unearn grace? I mean, it's not earned in the first place, so you can't really, can you do anything to not earn it? Because you didn't earn it in the first. So anyway, just let me collect my thoughts here. No, but that's the idea. It's grace, right? It's this grace poured out on Jacob, whether he likes it or not, whether he's following God or not. And that's what the whole idea of the covenant is too. The covenant God made with Abraham. Abraham was asleep, and so he didn't really have anything to do with it. And all he was supposed to do was be obedient then afterwards. And the same thing with Jacob here. It's not like God saying, well, if you do this, this, and this, then you'll get my grace. It's like, here's grace, now you do this. Grace always comes first, and then everything comes afterwards. Same thing for us as Christians. When we first came to Christ, it's not like I did all these things first, and then grace came to me. Grace came first, and then I responded to God. However I did it. For me personally, I prayed one night, and I was alone in my room as a kid. And that's how I responded the first time to God's grace. And then I've been responding to his grace ever since then. So it's different for everyone, but that's really how it happens. And God doesn't give you grace because of who you are, what you've done, because you say a magical prayer or whatever. God gives grace because he wants to. It's a free grace. He's not, it's not tied to anything. It's only tied to his own will and his purposes. And then he gives that, and then people respond. It's the case that we've seen from the beginning of Genesis here. Grace is given, people respond. But grace always comes first. So we'll come back next time. We're going to take a look at some of what Jacob does here. What happens to Jacob when he wakes up? He's just had this amazing vision of God. He's seen the ladder. He's seen the angels. He's heard the covenant promises pronounced over him by God himself. What's he going to do? So come back next time. We'll take a look at verses 16 through 18 where we can kind of see what Jacob does. What's his response?